this course, I've been using terms like user experience designer and user experience strategist. So I want to talk for a little bit about the different roles and the different jobs that there are in the field of UX. And this is another place where you won't see a lot of consensus, and my descriptions and my definitions might not be the same as other people's. So just know that I'm going to tell you what I think and what I think is common out there, but you will probably see lots of variation and variability in terms of, what's a UX designer, what's a UX strategist. So let's talk a little bit about these terms. A lot of them are used interchangeably. A UX designer, which is probably the most frequently used term, refers to someone who is doing some or all of the tasks that I was describing. So that's kind of the broadest term. We say, oh, I'm a UX designer, or I'm looking for someone to do UX design. And usually that means that they are looking for someone who's going to be making decisions about the interface of the product. And they might be making high-level decisions, they might be making detailed decisions, they might be making both. They might be doing some of the user research, they might be doing some of the user testing, they might be doing the whole thing, or they might just be focused in on a small piece, like the high-level design or the detailed design. But they are working on putting together this interface between the person and the product. In some organizations, they split that UX designer role, and instead of the UX designer doing everything, understanding about the user, doing a high-level conceptual model, doing the detailed design, doing the testing, instead of one person doing all of that, they split it up, especially if you're in a large organization and there's a lot of projects going on. They may have people specialize. So if they're going to have people specialize, here's how that specialization often, not always, but often works. So there will sometimes be someone who is a UX researcher. And typically that means they're doing the research on who's the target audience and what's the context of use and what are the most important scenarios. They might be doing not only that, what I consider upfront research, but they might be doing research as in user testing. After the design is put together, they will research and get some feedback from the target audience about the prototype design. So sometimes a UX researcher means the front-end research and what kind of like the end of prototype research or through design research. Sometimes it just means the upfront. Sometimes the person who does the testing of the prototype once a design has been is being tried out, sometimes that person is called a user testing specialist or UX testing. So sometimes they put upfront and the testing part together, and sometimes they pull that apart. Now, in addition, a term that you're probably going to hear is UI, or user interface, or UID, user interface designer. And that's probably a term that has perhaps the most controversy of all the terms that I'm using. What does that mean? What's a UI designer? That usually refers to, or I'm going to say it refers to designing down at that micro level, designing in the particular screen. What's that screen going to look like? But not everyone uses the term that way. Sometimes in some organizations or in some job descriptions you might see a UI designer is also doing high-level design, like what should the menus look like. Sometimes they're doing almost exclusively visual design. What should the colors be? What should the overall layout of the page or the screen be? Sometimes they're doing a combination of visual design and detail design and high-level design, but they're not doing their research. So this is probably the term that I think it is used, has the least amount of agreement when the term is being used. In my definition, a UI designer is the one that's doing the detailed design of particular screens. But like I said, not everyone follows my definition. So if you, for instance, are looking for a job as a UI designer, or if you are writing a job description because you want to hire someone, you may want to really be specific, especially about that one, as you are likely to get different people applying depending on what they think a UI designer is or does. Now, another term that you might hear is UX strategist, and that is also, like UI designer, I've seen that defined a number of different ways. So it could mean UX strategist could be someone who is designing that high level. It could be someone that is planning all the UX work, and then there's other people like UX researchers and UI designers and user testers that will implement the work, and they're providing the overall plan of the user experience part of the design and development of this product. Oftentimes, a UX strategist refers not just to people working on one product, but at a higher level at the organization. So a UX strategist is a person who is in on conversations and meetings at a higher level inside the organization, like with planning, what should we be designing? What does any of our software need to change this year? What is the research that's coming in about our customers and how satisfied they are, or about new trends in customers, or about our competitors, and how should we react from does the user experience of any of our products need to change as a result of that data coming in? So it's a much higher level role within the organization, would possibly be a UX strategist. So that's one that, again, if you're interested in that, you're going to have to really read the details, or really be specific if you're creating a job description about what you want for that position. And then sometimes you'll see the term, for instance, director of UX. And so typically the director of user experience is in charge of the whole UX team. So maybe you have UX researchers, and you have UX designers, and you have user interface designers, and you have visual designers, and then you have a director that's over all of them. And this person then, is doing project planning, project management, is making sure that the vision of UX that perhaps is coming from the UX strategist is implemented across all the products, is probably, the director of user experience is probably responsible for things like making sure there are design standards, visual design standards, layout standards, wording standards that are applied, making sure that whatever the process is, and we're going to talk about process in a minute, but making sure that whatever the UX process is being done, throughout. And so that's, director of user experience is usually overseeing the whole department. Now, I've been talking about, departments and strategists and multiple people, and you might be saying, wait a minute, I'm the only person, they want me to do UX, and it's just me. And certainly there are a lot of organizations that, especially small organizations, or perhaps a department within a large organization that has one UX person and you're it. And if so, then you are basically doing everything that we've talked about, and you're probably going to spend most of your time doing user research, doing high-level design, doing detailed design, and doing user testing. And it's a lot for one person to do. So, but sometimes that happens. So that's just some of the terminology. Now, there's one other term that I want to talk about, and that's usability. So I don't think I've used the term usability. I've been talking about user experience. So what is usability, and is that different than user experience? And usability is another term that isn't always used the same way. So if we back up in history, because we haven't really talked much about the history of this field, but if we back up in history, what we'll find is that before the term user experience came on the scene, and it came on in the late 1990s, and I don't think really came into common usage until somewhere in the 2000s. But before that, there was another term that was floating around out there, and that was usability. And that was the idea that products should be easy to use and easy to learn. And it usually had a fairly narrow focus on ease of use and ease of learning. So it didn't necessarily have to do with meeting the organization's goals. It didn't necessarily have to do with engagement and so on. It had to do with just being easy to use. Maybe that's an oversimplification. I certainly was in the field when it was called usability, and I did a lot of usability work. Sometimes people say usability, and what they're referring to is specifically the user testing function. When you test a prototype, you test an interface that you've designed. But usability really meant user research, high-level design, detailed design, and user testing. But again, it was mainly from the point of view of making things easy to use. So when the whole idea of user experience and it started to grow, and there was a sense of of course, easy is important, but there's more than just easy. There's satisfying, there's pleasant, there's persuasive, there's engaging, there's getting the person to take the action we want them to take. When it broadened out like that is when the term user experience came into play. Some people use those terms interchangeably, and others make a distinction.